Hello and welcome to another episode of Leaders of Transformation. Today we're going to talk about self-talk. You know, how to empower yourself, and also some of those words you want to watch out for that may be disempowering to you talking to yourself, but also when you're talking to other people. We have a wonderful guest here, Fran Bontempo. She is a two-time TEDx speaker, author, and humorist who teaches audiences to control their most powerful influence, self-talk. She is the author of The Woman's Book of Dirty Words and Not Ready for Granny Panties, which, of course, when I saw that come through my email, I was like, oh, this is just interesting, right from, like, I'm just curious on what she's about right away. And she's written for multiple online platforms, including the Huffington Post and Thrive Global. After 30 years of experience as an owner of a full-service recruiting firm, she found herself in the middle of the perfect life storm, and I'm not gonna share it. She's gonna share it here with us today, and what she learned from it, and how it brought her to today, and what she discovered. So, Fran, I'm really excited to have you here. Welcome to Leaders of Transformation.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm thrilled to be here. We connected a little while ago and had a conversation, and just kind of felt like we were sort of kindred spirits on the same path. So I'm delighted to have this opportunity to chat.
Yes, absolutely. And definitely there's going to be a lot we're going to talk about here. But before we do that, for our listeners out there and our viewers, if you're watching the video, we're really excited that you're here, because this podcast is designed to inspire you and to equip you to be the difference maker that you're capable of being. And I do believe, I say this almost every time, I say, I believe that every single person has tremendous value to bring to the world. And it's when we bring our value to the world, all collectively, that this world changes and becomes a better place to live. So we're going to experience that a little bit through Mary Fran's story today and how she's doing that. I do hope that it inspires you if you're out there already making an impact, and maybe this will give you some added fuel and inspiration and some tools. But then if you're thinking about it and wondering how can you do it, maybe you've been through a lot of difficult times in your life and you're like, what do I have that I can use? I hope that this inspires you, that you do have some tremendous value to bring. And we'd love to hear your story and how you're doing it and how you're planning to do it and how we can support you in that. So you can go to leadersoftransformation.com and you can reach out to us there. You can also go on social media and find us there and share with us what you're up to. And afterwards, if you like this episode, please go to iTunes and leave us a rating or review. It really does help us extend our reach. We're in 120 countries. We want to continue to extend that reach out. Sometimes in North America, we kind of take for granted that we have all these podcasts to listen to, and we can go to events in our local cities, and it's really cool. But there are places in the world that don't have those opportunities, and this can be the lifeline for them. And we want to make sure that they get the opportunity to be inspired as well. So we appreciate that. Oh, one last thing is I contributed to a book last year, and it came out early this year, called Power Up Superwomen, and it is stories of courage and empowerment. Mary Fran, certainly, she's not in the book, but she certainly could have been in the book, because we're going to hear her story today. But these are some other ladies that have had tremendous difficulties in their life and how they overcame those difficulties and have been doing amazing things in the world. And the idea is to inspire you, to empower you to be the superwoman and bring that superwoman out. So if you're interested in getting a copy of that, you can go to leadersoftransformation.com/resources. All right, Mary Fran, you have a perfect storm that you found yourself in the middle of. Talk about what that was and
it was awful. Well, I think most people have these periods in their lives where things converge, and we just had a number of years ago just a perfect whirlpool of mess. There were a lot of things going on, one of which was the economy was tanking. My husband and I have a search firm, a staffing company, as you mentioned earlier in the bio. And at the time, with that kind of business, you either, if you have a temporary side of it or a full-time permanent side, one is usually up, one is usually a little bit down. At that time, they were both completely flatlining. So, our primary way of life was being threatened. I was at the time a newspaper columnist for a lot of smaller newspapers and magazines, and the internet was completely changing the face of publishing. So all of my jobs were just disappearing like dinosaurs being hit by an asteroid, which was the internet. I was turning, I guess it was 50 at the time, which I thought was a tragedy. Now I'm like, can I get that number back, please? Can I have that back? But the worst thing that we were in the throes of, and this was really the game changer, was that our son was in the middle of a heroin addiction. And, I think the scourge that the opioid addiction is on our world and our country right now, I don't think there is a person in this country who isn't either related to, knows of, there's some connection to someone who is having that issue. It is that widespread. And when it comes so close to home as to be in your own home, it changes everything about who you are and who you thought you were in a moment, in an instant. In my instance, where the definitive moment was Mother's Day of 2010, when my son overdosed. It wasn't on heroin because he couldn't get it, but it was on a pain medication. We got him to the hospital, and the doctors told us that if they couldn't reverse the effects of it, he would need a liver transplant if he lived. So, yeah, it was horrific, to say the least. And while I will not go so far as to say, sometimes people have terrible things happen, and in retrospect they go, oh, it was a blessing. Like, no, it was not. It was not a blessing. It was terrible. I will say that years down the road, it has changed us in ways that we are now doing things that are different, but hopefully good.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I always say that, God doesn't waste any experiences, and especially the painful experiences.
Yeah.
And there is a promise that he can turn it all for good, and it may not be that, it's a blessing. And it's like me going through divorce and saying it's a blessing.
Yeah.
No. Business failures, health failure. No,
nope.
Wouldn't go that far. But the blessing was in how I was able to get through it, and like how you're able to get through it. And that's some pretty extraordinary statistics, to think that nearly every single person has had some experience with people that are struggling with an addiction.
Mm-hmm. I think it's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, there is a lot. I was surprised, actually, living in LA, how many people were addicted. I actually had a client, somebody referred me to someone very successful, but struggling. But, I asked him if he was using, and he, of course, said no. But very quickly it came out that he certainly was. I actually had somebody I rented a room to, who was doing fine for, the first number of months. And then one day just went off. And unfortunately, we discovered it was heroin. And the thought of those next 4 days, he had to leave. And that was, it wasn't acceptable to the building because he was creating havoc. And, but to have that in your own home, I could just only imagine what that must be like. And so, yeah. Now you're a lady that is, you're a humorist. You write. You've got these books that you've written, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For those that are listening, she's got on the back shelf, she's got a couple of the copies there. So talk to us about what you learned through this experience about yourself, and how you were able to, how it's led you to where you are now.
So that's a great question, because everything about where I am now had its germination in that experience, because those kinds of experiences are so profoundly, and again, it was all the things that were together. But an experience like that, where you have a child who is addicted, and quite literally every day is a balance between life and death. Is he going to make it through the day? Are we going to be able to do this? What's going to happen at the end? You just don't know. So it's such a transformative thing that everything changed as a result of that. And for me, what happened one day, I was just in the middle of this whirlpool of caca, and was just lamenting with a friend the aging thing. And I just said, oh, I'm so not ready for Granny Panties. And right there, the writer in me pricked up and went, oh, like I can do something with this. So the interesting thing about it was the fact that my newspaper jobs were drying up was certainly not the worst. It was bad, but it certainly wasn't the worst. Obviously, the issue with my son was the worst. But that small phrase that piqued the interest of a part of me that's really an intrinsic part of who I am, that little tiny candle of a thing became something that I hung my energy on. I thought I can do something with this. What I was going to do with it, I wasn't sure, but I thought, well, I'll start a blog and make $1 million and then all my problems will disappear. Of course, that didn't happen, but I did start a blog from that. And that little bit of movement in a direction that took me away from that valley. It was the first sort of climb out of the valley towards the next peak. And I mean, life is that. It's this up and down, the hills and valleys kind of a thing. So that one little bit of a phrase that I was able to take and think I could do something with this, it provided the impetus to move forward in some way. And that little bit of movement gave me movement in other areas. Okay, well then maybe we'll try this. Okay, then maybe we'll try that. Till eventually we got my son into treatment. We streamlined our business, closed our office. You know, we started working virtually for our staffing company. I always say I decided 50 was the new 30, and by my own estimations, I'm 39, so I'm sticking with that story. But it was, the concept was kind of, I use this a lot when I speak to groups. You get into a car at night and you turn the headlights on, and you can only see about 200 feet in front of you, but you drive through it anyway. Mm-hmm. So you start on a journey and you go as far as you can see, and then you go as far as you can see, and then you go as far as you can see. One little thing can make the difference.
Yeah. Well, and what I also hear in there is you had to have something to look forward to. So when you're driving the car, if you're looking down or you're looking in the rearview mirror, you're gonna crash. And so you're looking ahead. And this gave you something to hold on to and something to look forward to and to navigate through. It's like there's a saying, when you're in a valley, or in the desert, don't stop.
Right.
Like, keep going.
If you're going through hell, keep going, to quote Winston Churchill. Yeah, yes. You do. You make those small movements, and this was really important too, and for a very practical reason, and I say this when I speak, again, to groups all the time, you can't be married to an outcome. You have to be willing to start something and say, okay, let's see where this is going to go, and be willing to evolve with it, and sometimes be willing to jettison things if they don't work, and that's fine. But you can't, as I very clearly learned in having a child who was addicted to heroin, who, by the way, is doing very well now. That's important for people. Wonderful. He's coming up on 8 years clean and sober, 2 babies, 1 more on the way. He works in the recovery field, so he has helped quite literally thousands of people get into treatment.
That is amazing. That's a blessing.
Is. And my story could be very different, and I am very, very well aware of that. But you can't be married to an idea of what something's going to be, because you just don't know. So that lesson that clearly was driven home to me in that experience with my son, but I've managed to take that and transfer that to everything since then. So you start things and you have an idea and whatever, and just be willing to evolve with it. Because something better than what you envisioned, like I said, I started this blog. Well, the blog's not the thing now. It's still there, but it's the books, it's the speaking, it's the TEDx talks, it's the programs, it's all that stuff that I wasn't part of the plan. It just kind of happened because I was willing to evolve with whatever was happening next.
Yeah. So talk to us about that. So you self-talk. So your books.
Yes.
You did. So tell us about what you actually teach people. for your books and for your
First of
people?
all, one of the things that I tell them, and I think this is really important, is that you are not going to defeat the negative voice in your head by learning something new. You're going to defeat it by remembering what you already know about yourself. We tend to forget and we tend to minimize. We have this weird dynamic in America that if something's not really hard, then it's not worthwhile, or it's not our we haven't struggled enough
No
to.
pain, no gain.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah, I'm in for gain without pain.
yeah, exactly. And I think what happens is consequently, many of us do not work our areas of brilliance because we feel like there's not enough struggle involved in that. And
Great
we
point.
tend to forget what our natural gifts are and what we're really good at. And we poo-poo that because, well, it's just, that's just easy for me. Well, that's good. It's good. That's good that it's easy. Go with that. So it's a matter of recognizing, not talking yourself out of your own gifts and your own brilliance. And, we talked about in the book, the Woman's Book of Dirty Words, one of the dirty words that I start with is the word change. And we, as women, we don't like change because usually we build a house of cards to keep everything going. And if one card gets pulled out and the whole thing comes crashing down, we're just at a loss because we have to rebuild it. But what I say is we rebuild it every single day. We're already change experts, and we don't allow ourselves to pat ourselves on the back for that. So it's not about running into a brick wall and telling that critical voice in your head that I'm better than you say. It's not that. It's recognizing the gifts that you already have and remembering where you shine. That's how you shush that voice in your head.
So that's coming from that place of love, not from the place of contradiction or fighting it. I
Yeah.
remember one of my clients, I said to her, I said, little voice mastery is not about outrunning your little voice. Like, la,
No.
la, 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 can't hear you, can't hear you.
No,
It's
it's
not that.
not.
That doesn't work.
No, because it never shuts up. I mean, that voice in your head, it just never shuts up. But there is a way to shush it. That's one of the other things when I'm talking with groups of women. I go, what do we do when our children are upset, or we shh. That is such a comforting sound if you use it on your own brain.
Yes.
Just shh, calm down, just shush. Recognize that you're already a change expert. You've already got this. Whatever you're going through, there have been other things and they've passed. So whatever this is, this too shall pass and you will get through it. So comfort yourself with that knowledge instead of that voice saying, well, you're never going to get this. You're never going to manage this one. You said that to yourself about the last crisis, whatever it was. And yet here you are.
Yes, great point. No, so you talk about words that are affirming and words that you need that are limiting that we want to avoid. Maybe give us a few more examples of those, because I actually think that a lot of us are unaware of what we actually say to ourselves. I mean, I've had clients who have said to me, I'm so stupid. I'm like, well, don't say that. He's like, I'm just joking. No, your subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what's real or imagined, the truth or a lie. Whatever you keep telling it over time repeatedly, it's gonna buy into, and it's gonna reinforce it. So
Yeah.
telling yourself you're stupid or you can't do this, or the classic I don't know, so tell us some of those words that we want to avoid, and then what words that we can use that will build us up.
So I think a lot of the words that are in our everyday vocabularies mean so many different things to us than they were originally intended to mean. And they're often the smallest words. Like they're like, for example, the word no. I mean, and people have talked about this before. That word can be both a weapon and a savior. It just depends on how we use it. We know ourselves into death saying we're not good enough, we can't manage this, we won't be able to, whatever, but then we don't say no to protect ourselves enough to buy ourselves the room to maybe learn things, and we take on obligations that we shouldn't when we should be saying no especially where our family's are concerned, we have to learn to say no. So take that word and stop saying no to your possibilities. Say no to some of your presumed obligations, which are mostly self-imposed. I mean, when you really, really, really get down to it, there's not that much that we have to do every single day. We impose those obligations on ourselves. So we need to take a little word like that, and we need to see the power in it and use it to our advantage instead of to our detriment all the time. So that's a biggie. That's a biggie. I also talk about the word fine. We are allergic to the word fine. If everything is not amazing or awesome or incredible, we feel like we're dropping the ball. Everything doesn't have to be awesome. Sometimes it just has to be done. Sometimes, fine is better than perfect. Just get it done and let yourself off the hook and move to something that's more important. I tell this story all the time. This was my fine moment. This brought it home to me. I was asked to bring the paper products for a baby shower. So of course it had a theme, because every party's got to have a theme. And the theme was ladybugs. Well, I couldn't find these ladybug plates anywhere. And I spent days running to stores and trolling the internet. You can find them everywhere now, but I couldn't then. So I very shamefacedly brought these lovely flowered paper plates to this party, and they were fine. Nobody cared but me that they didn't have a ladybug on them. And think about the time that I wasted. And the energy that I wasted, because I couldn't just go, it's a plate, and people are going to just put food on it and throw it away, which is exactly what they did. So we have to, a lot of this is about letting yourself off the hook with expectations and words that we have turned into something else in our heads. Fine is never good enough anymore. Yes, it is. Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it's a great point, because there are times when we spend so much time on the little things that we don't have the time, coming back to what you said about saying no to the things that are really not that big of a deal or important. Even in our schedule, like we say yes to everything because we feel like we need to say yes and accept, and everything that comes our way. And if you don't have a plan for your life, you'll fit into somebody else, or somebody else will try to fit you into theirs. And so you end up saying yes to a whole bunch of things, and there's that. But what I hear in what you're saying, which is a great distinction, is that there are things we put. I mean, I'm a big believer in doing everything with excellence. But excellence, sometimes it's like, it's a plate. Get a plate that works, and then move on. And because there's much bigger fish to fry in the world, and bigger things to focus on in the world than that. So
we tend to think that people are judging us on everything. And first of all, they aren't, because nobody's thinking about you as much as you think they're thinking about you.
They're thinking about themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. And worrying because they didn't bring the right napkins to go with the plates that I brought that were the wrong plates. So we create this ridiculous dialogue and these ridiculous scenarios in our heads that stifle us in so many ways, because people, first of all, I totally agree with doing things with excellence. However, not everything needs to be done with excellence. Now, obviously, you're not going to bring dirty used plates. You're going to bring clean new ones, but that's where that can stop.
And that's the definition of excellence in that case. Yes.
Exactly. The definition of excellence can vary on the basis of what you're doing. You don't have to buy gold-edged paper plates with the ladybug hand painted on it for it to work for this particular party. So, save your energy for stuff that matters, and be willing to accept fine. Accept that in many circumstances. That's also a very loaded word, because sometimes we tell ourselves things are fine when they're not. So there is a measure of, don't accept something and don't blow it off and say it's fine when intrinsically it's not. Be willing to, going back to your idea of excellence, be willing to figure out where you need to pursue more than fine and where you can settle for fine, because it's not really settling if that idea of excellence changes.
Yeah. So when you do your speaking and your workshops and so forth, what do you find? You've worked with so many people now. What do you find for women in particular are the words that they use? Fine is certainly one of them. You know, oh, she's fine. She said she was fine, which really doesn't mean, you know, like the joke is, right? When a woman says fine, you know something's wrong.
Yeah.
But or nothing. What's wrong? Nothing.
Yeah, nothing.
Like,
that's when we use fine as a passive aggressive weapon. That's another way to not use fine.
Yeah.
It's about communication.
Yeah. So talk to us about, like, what are some of the other words or the most common words that people use that limit their joy and their happiness?
So my take on this is a little bit different than what most would be, because I like to take words that seem like they mean one thing, but we can turn them around to make them mean another thing. And one of the words that I like to play around with is the word ignorance. And people think of that as a bad thing. However, if you take that word at its root, the word ignore, that can be a very good thing.
That's true, yeah.
And we have to learn to practice intentional ignorance. Because if you look for reasons to be offended, if you look for problems, if you look for things that are really going to take you away from your main purpose and your main focus, you're going to find them. You're going to find reasons to be offended. You're going to find other places where you can stick your nose into other people's business that's going to keep you from focusing on your business and on your work and on your whatever it is that you need to rise to your potential. So that's a word that I like to say to women. You need to embrace ignorance. You need to embrace intentional ignorance and use that in a way to declutter your life, declutter your mind, and learn how to focus on what's really important. And it can become a very, very valuable tool in living your life and in helping other people, and I'm thinking of your family here, live theirs. We have to learn to ignore our family's drama and stuff, especially as our kids get older, and let them figure it out for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny because when, on my, when I open up my browser, I have certain things like the tabs there that are kind of preset as my beginning tabs. And I actually put Google on as the first one, because initially I had Facebook as the first one, because if I open up, I'll check, or CNN or Fox or one of the other ones. But it was so distracting, that you're like down this rabbit hole and you're going, wait a second, this is not why I went to my, the internet. Right. So I actually put a blank one. I do want those open so I can have them, so I don't have to keep typing it in every time. But I have the blank Google so that it's kind of like a blank page, blank slate. Because otherwise I'll just, and I'm a focused person. So it's not that I'm not focused. Like normally people will say, oh, she's so focused. But yet I can even get distracted going down this rabbit hole and going, and literally, and of course, maybe that does come with a little bit with age. I don't know. People say that, but I'm like, age is a number and it's all a mindset. But I'll be like, what was I doing? I don't even know what was I doing.
Well, it's impossible not to be distracted. Yeah. How can we live in this world, this 24-hour news cycle where there's things popping up all the time and this notification and your phone's beeping and all that other kind of stuff? Practiced intentional ignorance can truly be bliss. And it gives you that space inside of your head. So and that is so important towards getting anything done and towards remembering what you were trying to remember to do in the first place, because it takes a nanosecond for something to fill in the blanks.
Yes.
And pretty soon, like you said, you're off chasing a rabbit when that wasn't what was supposed to happen this morning.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So, when you speak and you do the things you do, like, so what, I mean, your life, what is it now? Like, do you still have that business, the recruiting
We
business?
do, we
Yeah.
do. I'm less involved in that. It's still my husband's full-time business, but again, it's something that uh, we streamlined, and for matters of our conversation, we learned to ignore certain things that we didn't need to do anymore. It's when we're recording this, I'm not sure when you're airing, but it's springtime, so people talk about spring cleaning, and um, there are mental things that we can learn to ignore and to move away from. Another one of the things that I say to women, that the first book is the 11 commandments for avoiding granny panties, and one of the commandments is thou shalt lose control. And that sounds so counterintuitive, but once again, it kind of dovetails nicely with that idea of ignorance, of giving up control over things that we don't have control over in the first place. The range of what we can actually control and what we think we can control, there's such a spread there. And we have to really start to think, okay, what is my sphere of influence here? What am I actually going to accomplish by sticking my nose into this?
Yeah.
I'm working on a new book now called The 15-Minute Master, and that book started because when we were in the middle of my son's heroin addiction, people would say, oh, you have to take it one day at a time. And my husband and I were like, a day? Are you kidding? A day? We can't do this a day at a time. So we literally were down to 15 minutes at a time. But what ended up happening in that time period was that I very quickly and almost subconsciously began to narrow down my choices of what I could do to a few questions. What can I do? What should I do? And what am I going to do? Very, very specific questions that forced me to eliminate things that were not in my control. If I can't influence this in a really direct way, and if it's not important enough and it's not my problem, that's another thing, because we as women, especially if you have kids, you're solving their problems from the time they're little. At some point, you got to stop. You have to stop, and you have to lose control over the things that you really never had control over in the first place. You
So
just have
what
to
I
admit it.
Yes, yes. Well, and so what I hear is that you're really transforming the way people use their words, the way they um, perceive words and language, and
Hmm.
how, and even their focus. Tony Robbins has this thing, he calls it the Triad, where it's like change your words, change your focus, change your state. And through our words, we can change the way our experience of life, which you're doing. And even like taking these things like ignorance and control and things that we have these perceptions about, and you're transforming the way people actually see them and embracing them, not as bad things, but that how could they actually, so it's like
Yep.
you're flipping all these things and breaking people's pattern as to what they, the way they do things or the way they perceive their life. It's brilliant.
And that's actually what happened to me when we found out that my son was an addict. I mean, everything was broken. All of the systems that I thought defined my life, all of the things that the very carefully constructed framework that I had for my life, it just blew up in that moment. I mean, this was not a, oh my gosh, my son's fine and now he's a heroin addict. I mean, I knew that there was stuff going on. I just didn't know exactly what it was until that particular time. But when you have an experience like that flips your entire world upside down, you, because you have no other choice, you have to find out how to use that.
Mm,
So in getting through and in living upside down and figuring out how to use that, I thought, you know what, there is something to be said if people do this intentionally and
yes.
they flip their preconceived notions of what they should be doing, what they think life is supposed to be, what they think their obligations are, and what they think about words. Like I said, like, because I'm a writer, words are my thing. What they think about a word like ignorance. Use that. If somebody calls you ignorant, I'm like going to thank them today. Yes, I am, because I only want to concentrate on what is meaningful. There's so much noise out there.
Yeah.
Concentrate on what is meaningful, and and don't apologize for ignoring the rest.
Yes. Oh, I love this. This is great. So what for you, obviously you're not ready for Granny Panties. I suspect that that's probably still the case. 9 years out, you're still in that situation. So what, of course, you're probably reframing as well. Just thinking about it in my head, reframing what Granny Panties are. They could be fun.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, you know what? I think when I started writing this, it was about this mental. I used a phrase in the book that granny panties are mental bolts of fabric soaked in fear. Like that was kind of what it was, because like we we get ourselves in these positions that we hang on to it because it's what we know. It's not
Right.
what's best for us. It's what we know. And I think as you create what you perceive to be a safe space for yourself in life, you hang on to it till you're white knuckled. So I decided, because I had no other choice but to decide with my son's issue, that I wasn't there. I couldn't hang on. I had nothing to hang on to. So why not create an alternate reality that is, because the rug was pulled out from under me and I had to learn stuff that I didn't want to learn, why not create a reality where I want to learn stuff? Why not create a reality where I decide, okay, well, that didn't work out. I'm going to try something else, and let go of that idea of having to be safe all the time and know what's coming next, because I found out that I didn't and I wasn't. I didn't know and I wasn't safe. So we all live in that reality, whether we want to accept it or not. So if you can at least shelve the fear part of it and go, all right, well, I'm going to see what happens today and see if I can make something out of this. That to me is not being ready for granny panties.
Got it. So what's next for you? The next 5-10 years? What's your
Well, believe it or
vision?
not, and I'm going to say this just because I want to think that I look way younger than I actually am, but I am a grandma of 3, and believe it or not, my two daughters, and my daughter-in-law, the little buggers, made a pregnancy pact, and all 3 of them are pregnant now. So by the end of October,
Wow.
I will have 6 grandchildren.
Congratulations. That's
Thank
awesome.
you. Yeah, thank you. So obviously there's a lot of joy on the home front, but as far as work and things like that go, this message, even though I am of a certain age, resonates so well with all different age groups of women. And I find that women who are my daughter's ages, late 20s, early 30s, it resonates really well with them. And the whole idea of this 15-minute master, this new book of making powerful decisions with one action step as a result of a 15-minute focal point, that's actually a method that I can teach people. Up to this point, it's been, I don't know that I was able to refine it to that level, but that's going to be a new book and new programs and new speaking about all of that, and just kind of telling people to lighten up on themselves and understand that they don't have to be sweating and pushing through life all the time. They can turn and float wherever the river takes them,
Mm.
and 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 make something good out of it, even when it doesn't start out that way.
Well, I think that the next generation, one of the things that I think is missing in society is more mentorship.
Hmm.
And what you're talking about is this message is resonating with women from all ages, even younger, and I'm sure older as well. But younger, this younger generation is, for them, they're looking for mentorship. And as we share our, your experience, other people, women that share their experience, I know that some of the ones that have been on my show, they talk about, you know, teaching the younger generation of women so they don't have to go through the same, they're going to go through their own experiences. I mean, that's a
Exactly.
given, but they don't
Exactly.
have to go through the same experiences and or missing out on not having the tools to be able to manage through it. And so we can teach that next generation how to go through it, and so that they can truly evolve into, continue to evolve overall. So it's really, really powerful. So how do people find out about your books, your speaking, your new programs that are going to be coming up?
So my website is www.maryfranbontempo.com, and pretty much everything is there. I'm ubiquitous all over the place. There's all sorts of news about programs and books and happenings. There's an opportunity to sign up for a newsletter, which I only put out a few times a year. I'm not one of those folks that, bombards you every couple days, every week or whatever, because that's white noise after a while to me. I don't listen to it anyway. So I try not to do that to other people. And then I'm also all over social: Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, just like I said, ubiquitously everywhere, and all things point back to the website. So that's probably the best place to start. And the new book should be published, it should be out this summer. I'm hopeful by the end of June 2019, it should be out there, and there'll be programs coming based on that.
Fantastic. Well, then it'll be out by the time this comes out. We're recording in the springtime, but we're a bit ahead of schedule. So it'll be out by then. So we'll make sure a link to that is in the show notes as well. Mary Fran, thank you so much for bringing you're just like this bright light and this joy that you bring, and also this like free flowing energy of just whatever it is, we're just going to go with it.
We're going to figure it out. We're going to figure it out. Whatever it is, we got this. We're going to figure it out. So thank you. It was a pleasure, Nicole. Thank you so much. I enjoyed it very much.
Yeah. Thank you. And for our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Our viewers, thank you for tuning in. I hope that this gives you some encouragement to notice your words. I'm a big believer in leaders of transformation take action. Start noticing the words you use and start asking yourself, like, what do those words really mean? And if I was to flip those, as Mary Fran has shared with us today, how she's so beautifully been able to do that. If I flipped out those words around, is there a way that I can actually use that to my advantage? Or maybe there are some words we just need to let go of. And invite new words into our vocabulary that are more empowering. I encourage you to do that today, because our words create our world. And one of the things that I may probably heard it somewhere, but I say our words and our thoughts have creative power. I'm messing up my own quote. Our words and thoughts have creative power. What are we choosing to create today?
Perfect.
And so, ask yourself, like, what are you creating today? What do you want to create today? What do you get to create today? Because you can create it any way you want. No matter what happens, it's the response. That's what responsibility truly is. It's the ability to respond. So I encourage you that today. And you know what, even in that, like, there's a certain level of self-awareness of getting to know yourself. Who are you? In order to be able to be a leader of transformation and help other people and inspire other people, we got to know who we are and what we bring to the table. And we also got to know our strengths, but we also need to know some of the shortcomings so we can continue to get better and better and lead by example. So I encourage you that today. I'd love to hear your stories. You can go on leadersoftransformation.com. We're also, of course, all across social media. You can find us there. Love to hear your stories, your questions, your comments. And please, if you enjoy this episode, go on iTunes again and just leave us a rating and review. That really does make a huge difference. So we appreciate you. Thank you for being here. And we look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Leaders of Transformation real soon.